Hey everybody, Georgi here. So I know it's been a while since I have actually not been able to record any videos within a couple of weeks. I'm not going to get specific about how long ago it was, but anyway, so as we've yet been going through our day-to-day lives and our own challenges and accomplishments. So basically today's focus of the video that I just wanted to bring up and a more in an informal aspect of this conversation is the workforce. You know, the very experiences that we go through in the workforce and our many aspects, the understandings that we gain to basically understand and also be aware about maintaining longevity. So I wanted to bring up this really quick quote that I learned from my mom, about which she learned from her mom. Is a quick message of bloom where you can grow, bloom where you can plant, bloom where you are planted, bloom where you are planted is the quick quote I came across from her point of view, and having her been a long time, uh, a long time public servant through the social services and as a state employee. God bless her for that. So the one thing I really wanted to focus this video about, and as I go about basically just having to summarize to give it as a quick summary, to basically give you a more synopsis of the workforce mentality. You know how the many things, the obstacles, the negatives that we come across with is the preconditioned notion that we are brought into the very, would you say, the middle class lifestyle that not only just goes across the US but also across the world. You know, the one thing that we can't change is the policies and the rules through our national, state, national, or within our community governments. But really, the one thing we can be concerned about is the one thing of basically promoting citizen concerning within your own citizens' situation, such as, of course, being a concerned citizen in the community that we live in the midst of what we do for a living, such as our own careers, the very things that we take granted for. You know, the number of times that we've driven in traffic, the traffic systems that we come across every day in our, would you say, the 40-hour work week, the 9 to 5 lives that we stagnantly but also monotony, which is considered as monotony, boring at times. But you know, the one thing that we can also really be thankful for is that we have a job that allows us to put food on the table, to be able to put food in our mouths, to feed our family. You know, and in the end, yes, we don't have a lot, but we have to be thankful for what we have, being grateful for what we do have. But as understandably, we want to do more than that. We want to do just more than that from the standpoint of, and again, being in that workforce environment, having to take that option, to take that mentality of course, in many of our influences through what we get from our state and national agencies, whether if it's through the media, whether if it's through the newspapers that we read every day. But and again, the very aspects of having the workforce mentality is to basically to carry ourselves in a more respectful and a humble attitude. You know, well, that was one of the things that I have been noticing, and through my experience in the workforce development. I'm working in janitorial services now, but I'm now transferring over to a warehouse environment where it's going to allow me to get more involved and get along with more people, get to meet new people. And again, so with people, they're not perfect. Everyone's not perfect. But the one thing that we have in common is we have a we have we have we have a job. we have a responsibility to fulfill every day. We have a responsibility for us people in not just America at large, but also people across the world to impact the planet, to change the planet, to become basically the embodiment of what we can really do about changing the world for the better things, changing the worst things and turning it into the good. And such as, of course, there's a blessing and a curse in every ends of the spectrum. But and again, we have to really want to encourage ourselves to be an advocate. The very things that we want to be able to volunteer or get involved, or if we're most of the times we're as stagnantly and stressfully preached down upon about, all right, how much money did you make this week? What did you do at work today? How many more jobs can you do to make sure how many more jobs can you hold till you're able to bring home enough of the pay? Well, so the one thing that I also learned about is raising your value. Raise your value where you're at. The more times you spend, the more time you're going to get out of. Such as, of course, I speak from my experience and from the experiences that I've learned from both my parents, the true friends, of course, and they've got a good point of view. Listening to your parents, but also getting their point of view. But and again, they're not perfect. We're not perfect. One of the things that we come across ourselves in the workforce environment today at large is our differing of opinions. The differing of opinions that spreads so easily. When one person says one thing, it basically spreads all throughout, like a domino effect, basically. So, in doing so, we have to really evaluate about what's going on in the workforce today. Why so many people are not working. And one of the things, and again, that's caused us to basically get ourselves trapped in this stagnant situations of the polarization of what's going on all across the world, the effects in our capitalism of America, which capitalism is good for many certain areas because a lot of the people who run businesses that make jobs out of that, out of that comes for the good. Yes, of course, there's the bad side. There's going to be the gray area, but in every aspect of the workforce environment that we surround ourselves, that we go into every day, and that we spend our stagnant, boring driving hours to and from work, whether we work within 45 to 50 miles an hour, 50 miles away from our home, to just basically, yes, I mean, to make that decent salary that we can really be providing for and to basically sustain ourselves as people, to be able to, yes, make a great living, but also really being thankful and grateful for what you've got, but also in the same time, the things that we don't have time for. That's why we're so dependent upon the very things that were brought up into the conditions and the pre-noted aspects, and basically getting our information from other people. But also, what about checking your information for yourselves? Checking to make sure that the system's not taking advantage of you, or that we're not being just treated as cogs in the system. One of the things I came across from one of the consultants' point of view, his name is Douglas Kruger. Douglas Kruger talks about basically, and again, one of the things of being in the workforce and having to work, having a job and working for a living. Yes, of course, he also includes the one thing about creating wealth through talent and to know what you have that can make the whole world a difference. That could even make your whole community a difference at large as well. Taking that one small idea and turning it into the best thing, which of course can turn into profit. And so, and again, I go about in the more informal, casual conversation as though, a lot of you find this boring or stagnant or useful or useless information to you all at large because you don't want to listen to it. You don't want to take the time to listen to it. So anyway, I keep this as simple and short, brief as possible. So I mean, and again, pardon my cliches as I include everything about from my standpoint, from what you all can take from my comments that I bring up about. But so don't walk around every day feeling like shit and stagnant, like you say, like we think that we're just cogs in the system, because we are not cogs in the system. We are important people. That yes, we go in to our day-to-day jobs. That we have responsibilities. We have a responsibility to meet, not just on ourselves, but responsibilities that we have to fulfill, to accomplish, but also to make sure that yes, this is what's going to allow. This is what allows us to put food in our mouth every day, food on the table every day. In cases, the family settings, households for moms and dads who are in the workforce every day or who they have a business on their own that allows them to do those things. Such as, of course, I'm also a firm believer in optimism of whether you are working from home or running a business on your own. And there's many trends that we can really get into so far, speaking from the researchers, the very aspects of the great business people that can actually share knowledge. Only if it's up to us to really tap into that knowledge. Tapping into the knowledges of the famous people that we take granted for. As of course, love him or hate him, Donald Trump himself, as the president of the United States. The one thing he really did was he drew the silent majority. That's why he won them, because he spoke their language. So I talk again about when it comes to workforce environment, taking that language of just using your plain language, normal language ability, not that formal English language of what you've learned from college, of what you've taken from the subjects, but of course, just taking that plain language, use your plain language to, make not just make friendships with people that you know, but also actually smile more often. Having that smiling capability to just talk to the people and say, break up the conversation. As many times that we're surrounded with the very boring and as tempting things that we come across with, yes, I mean, we're complacent to, but also we should not be complacent to it. Because the more complacency would equal more control and enslavement of our environment surroundings. And again, we want to take that as critical as possible because, and again, to really be an important person in the workforce environment, but also to be a concerned citizen where you're living today. So one of the things that we come across hearing in the news today, the very things that we're tempted with this feeding of our brains, what we feed our brain with, what's going on in the news that they talk to us about with the very cases and the Trump impeachment investigations, whether true or not, the temptations in the politics between the interference of the establishment of Democrats and Republicans, independents to the strong left-wing parties, the very things that we're tempted with to watch and get to gratify our frustrations and stresses that we come across with. But and again, we gotta want to also maintain our composure. One thing we ask ourselves is, would getting rid of our pride and ego help us get through smoothly through our workforce environment and separating our opinion and differences and just really focusing on the very things that, what we want to get out of. Having that win-win mentality where we can just share our values through the very things that we want to care about, such as, of course, the saving of a human life through 911 and emergency personnel. When firefighters and paramedics get together and they just do the job, take the action to save a human life. The doctors in the medical industry, just get together and save a human life. Because right now, their differences, opinions don't matter in that situation. It's time to put it off. Focus on the very thing. Such as, of course, I go back from my very videos I talked about being in the moment. Focusing on your moment, focusing on your presence of what you're doing today. But again, still having that optimism, that goal orientation mentality to yes, there's more out there, but also focus on what you're doing now. Because what you're doing now and what I'm doing now, as well as what we're doing now as people, is going to be impacted upon what's going to turn out in 10 years, 20 years down the road from now, whether through technologically, psychologically, medically, environmentally, in our day-to-day things that we do today. For example, so I live in the northeastern area region, Washington D.C. metropolitan area. So, and again, pardon the whole thing about the differences in opinions that people have about the traffic pattern systems that's going on, such as, of course, the very things that we are coming across with where we're traveling back and forth to and from work, those that work down in the DC area, or of course, those people that work down in the inner city areas of New York City, Chicago, LA. I can't speak for them on my behalf, but of course they can take it from their own understanding on what they go through every day. But and again, that's really going to be up to the concerns that we bring about to the government systems that we work with, to the government systems that they can really be more just basically open-minded about hearing citizens' opinions, because we should not be silenced from our worries and our concerns. We should be more attentive to. Going back to the U.S. Constitution that was written for us, and the very things that was written for us is to basically ensure that the government is for the people, by the people, for the people. And the very words that you see that written in the constitutions from Articles 1 through 10, you see that very thing that's identified very well, of course, enshrined. That it's our constitutional right to bring about our opinions, to bring about our views and concerns of what's going on in our own government systems through city, county, state, national, at large. Because right now, looking over to the national government at large, and I don't know if you all are very well paying attention to this, but if you're not, hear me out on this. And this is one of the things I'm reading between the lines of basically taking that thing of having that mentality to read people. To be able to read people is to actually find out what's going on instead of getting distracted with the stupid and stagnant monotony of differing of opinions. But why don't you read through the people? Read through the comments of what the politicians are actually telling us. The establishment politicians, of course, and that's going between both parties, Democrats and Republicans. What are they doing in the federal government system that's not as impactful to us on our end, the citizens who work the day-to-day jobs to help meet our responsibilities? What can they do better for us that will make our lives a lot easier every day? Starting today, starting tomorrow, the next week. The one thing that we can really actually encourage ourselves is to basically put our foot down and keep demanding our government systems to make it better for us. You're working for us. Because after all, we're paying you to do your job. Our tax dollars are coming out of our pockets to make sure that you people do your job. So anyways, and again, coming from my standpoint, as a concerned citizen and as a person advocating for strong relationships and connections between, not just within the party members, but also just, connections within people to people at large, to have that capability where, we don't need to judge one another. We don't need to comment negatively one another through the very things that we talk about when it comes to racism, stereotype, um, prejudice, all of that. That's the one thing that's really been separating us people is that because we are living in a world where there is a strong force, and then again, a strong force through the corruption system of the government, where we have been divided in that mentality because by their agenda, they've led us to be that way through the very things that we're caring about ourselves through what we're talking about today, tomorrow, or even within the day-to-day actions. But, and again, so it's really up to us to do our homework. For example, the intrusions within the shadow government system when they had problems going on between the conflicting interest in the 9/11 attacks or the interference of the government systems between the U.S. and Russia when Russia admitted or did not admit that they interfered into the Democratic National Convention elections during the 2016 general election. So, and again, the very essence of the video I focus on is to make sure and to understand at large that we really need to carry ourselves strongly and faithfully to really help ourselves meet the responsibilities that we can also stay confident, but also not as stagnantly, selfishly, but also really just checking our pride and ego every day, to really carry out what we can really do as people throughout the world. For example, look at what's going on in the market system right now. So I'm again speaking from my research and experience. I've looked about right now the market economy is doing very well from not also about my standpoint, but of also through what's going to be impacted within that situation where we're impacting the market as people in the workforce or through the businesses that owners run to make sure that we're aware in containing ourselves as a country at large because we're still in debt as a country and that we are doing the one thing that we need to really be aware of is to make sure that our hard-earned savings are not being washed away in the end. And again, speaking through the very observations that I've come across by doing my homework, I've gained much more detail on and again the upcoming crash that experts have been talking about, the upcoming market crash that they have mentioned that we should really pay attention to, and it's very important. And I mention this as an important message to take into that I spread this to everybody to make sure that you are aware of what's going on, that we need to be aware of what's going to really happen for us 5 years down the road. But we also want to make sure that we're not being treated just cogs in the system, but also, yes, we are real people who we can really also find the real focus in ourselves through our structures of what we do to carry about, not taking granted for what we have every day, but also that, one thing I learned from Jocko Willink, former ex-Navy SEAL, spoken through a message that he wrote that he actually found from a written book by John Stryker Meyer, a former Army Green Beret from Vietnam War. Every breath we take when we step out is an utmost appreciation. So the one thing that we can really learn from that, and what's one thing that we can really take into in that aspects of the moment we step out every day, it is an utmost appreciation and a blessing to know that you're still alive every day. No matter where we're at, thick and thin, we have just got to maintain that confidence. We've got to maintain that smiling capability to carry out our responsibility, but also Be an advocate. Stand up. It's going to take a lot of breath. It's going to take a lot of confidence to maintain, but do it to your dying breath. I also really speak personally as well, because I'm from a foreign country. I was born in Georgia, former Soviet Union within the Russian Federation, when Russia was still at large, ruling not as an empire through the Soviet regime. Going back to the stories, long story short, having been born in Georgia, but also as a testimony from my experience of what I've come across and learning that I've learned as a citizen living in the U.S. at large, but also having to travel abroad. So the very things that we can really work on ourselves, but also really actually check our progress. Check our progress every day. The one thing that we can really progress ourselves, not just through the workforce, but also as individuals. Whether if it's spiritual, whether if it's financial, the emotional too. What's going to be our next goal? What's going to be the one thing that when we understand the concept of longevity, the longevity in ourselves as people, the longevity that we can really maintain in our workforce, the established career that we can really maintain. The one thing I also came across just through observance with, just talking to people that I've worked with every day, is the attitude. What's the attitude that people carry about, minus the rumors, minus the gossiping or the nonsense that's going on. What is the one thing that we can really find out about what's trickling from the top, but then again, it's being spread down to everybody? So, and again, it's up, and it's going to be up to the owners of that company. It's going to be up to the supervisors of that company to make that change. To grow. In order to grow, we have to change. One of the first things I've learned from expert business owners is, in order to grow as people, we have to change. And that's good. If we really want to change, then we have got to. And again, I speak this stressfully as possible and simple as I can be. We have got to swallow our pride and check our ego, because that's what's getting in the way. As pride and ego, and I've mentioned this before several times in the previous videos I've mentioned, pride and ego goes before destruction. If it's within the establishments of the family household that we've grown up in, the establishments in the jobs that we do every day, the workforce environment that we walk into every day, the political establishment environments between the political parties that just basically converse but also interfere with each other. So the very things that we can really also take into that concept, to just take into that mindset of just basically changing to grow, changing to understand each other, but also having that candid patience to carry ourselves. Because most of us don't have patience and they want to get it right away. Yes, it's understandable. That's understandable as well. But in doing so, what about just basically maintaining that confidence and taking that posture, carry your walk where you can basically impact the whole environment. Giving a smile to change someone's attitude. That very thing where smiles, yes, that can bring us more dollars. If one company smiles, if one set group of people in that company smiles every day, let's say they're interviewing with a new consultant member that they decided to partner with to grow their business, and these people show appreciation and that warm welcome attitude, I guarantee you that's given that it's gonna bring more dollars, it's gonna bring more people, it's gonna bring more business, but also more loyalty. The one thing that is also missing from my observations and some of the studies that have not really talked about in the workforce environments and how people get along in the workforce is, and again, I speak through not just from the state and federal agencies, but the loyalty aspect of just being loyal to the people that you work with, establishing the loyalty. And I know I get it. The very things that were preached down upon is to make sure you get that cushy job, you get that cushy career. Don't worry about what other people are talking about. Worry about yourself. I get that. But what about establishing loyalty and the trust with the people that you can work with every day, that you can depend on? The very things that we want to worry about, and that we always worry about, is managing our finances. The finances that we have to manage every day to maintain our livelihoods. So, and again, I leave this message as importantly as simple as possible, but also just take it in, let it soak it into you. But, smile every day. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. I hope you liked this video. Comments down below if you have any questions. I will happily answer as simple and confidently as possible. Bye-bye.